real people from the real jobs in front of the legislators that this is who I am. They're putting a name to the face to the project. And by doing that, they're not talking to a lobbyist. They're not talking to a business owner. They're talking to someone who's got grease under his fingernails, who works 13 hours a day, who puts in 70-hour weeks, who is away from his family, who's who's keeping the economy rolling, who's delivering the toothpaste, the toothbrushes, the beer you drink, the charcoal you cook with, and the steaks you broil and cook.
Trucking is difficult. It's an essential industry that every corner of the nation depends on, even without knowing it. To the average consumer, the supply chain is magic, and sometimes a black hole. Products on store shelves, dinner on restaurant tables, packages on doorsteps. It's expected to be there on time, every time, and only recognized if there's a service failure. But how is a sausage made? Who's talking about the issues that matter to trucking companies?
Welcome to TrueNorth Truck Thought, or the TTT Pod for short, a monthly podcast hosted by Scopelitas Transportation Consulting and brought to you by TrueNorth Companies. We're here to demystify the magic, address the black holes, and to talk trucking to the industry we love. Whether it's the latest research, upcoming laws and rules, safety issues and solutions, or practical discussions about real-life supply chain challenges, the TTT Pod is here to help the most important industry in our country to navigate its greatest challenges and opportunities. We bring together some of the best and brightest experts to talk about and tackle some of the most pressing industry issues. So without further ado, I'm Steve Kepler.
And I'm Sean Garney. Let's get trucking. Hello and welcome to the latest installment of the TTT Pod, brought to you by TrueNorth Companies and hosted by Scopelitas Transportation Consulting. There's been a lot of tumult in the trucking industry over the last several years around independent contractor issues. The motor carrier independent contractor model has come under significant scrutiny from state and federal officials who are passing laws and trying to write rules under the guise of protecting workers from predatory employers. Sadly, many of these rules and laws are being drafted and proposed by people without a complete understanding of the value of this model to the industry and, more importantly, to the small business owners operating as independent contractors. That's where the Coalition for Independent Truckers comes in. One of their missions is to develop and deploy a unified and focused national message that clearly conveys the importance of the independent contractor business model to the overall U.S. economy. They do this in part through their IC Ambassador program. Today, we are honored to host Bill Webb, Executive Director of Truckers Service Association, and also the leader of the Coalition for Independent Truckers. Bill has spent 30 years in and around the trucking industry. Previous to his time at Truckers Service Association, he spent 10 years as the president and CEO of the Texas Motor Transportation Association and started his trucking career at FFE, where he rose to the rank of Senior VP before becoming a trucking industry lobbyist. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
Also with us is Will Hart, an owner-operator with Dart Trans, where he's been for over 10 years now. Before joining trucking, Will was sales manager for Westco Fabrics for over 16 years, and now he's an IC ambassador. Thanks, Will, for taking the time out of what I'm sure is a busy day to chat with us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
You bet. And finally with us, we're pleased to welcome back to the pod Mr. Chris Gulker, Principal and Practice Leader at TrueNorth. Chris oversees TrueNorth's asset-light practice, where he helps companies understand the nuances of the independent contractor owner-operator model and helps companies protect and maximize their utilization of independent contractors. So thank you, gentlemen, everybody, so much for spending time with us today. Really looking forward to this important conversation.
Well, and thanks, Sean. Again, thank you guys. We appreciate it. It's obviously a hot topic in our industry, and it's very important to our industry. And so let's just go ahead and dive right in. Maybe Bill, we'll start with you. So tell us a little bit about the coalition, why it got started, who the members are, and what types of things you guys are working on right now.
Well, first of all, thanks for taking the time to talk about this issue. It's obviously important to us, but so this really first came up back in 2017 when AB 5 and other legislation was popping up around the country that really was a threat to the independent contractor status. So we started working through the American Trucking Associations to create an ambassador program. We got to start with it. There were a lot of other things going on in the industry, and then ultimately COVID hit, and we didn't get anywhere with it. So there were some key people in the industry, including Jason Smith from TrueNorth, who came back to me in December of 2022 and said, we'd like to do this again. We'd like to take another run at this. We had all the information developed, the strategy developed. And so we, by about Christmas, we started rolling this program out again. And it involves the American Trucking Association's Truckload Carriers Association, but really the heart of the effort is independent contractors themselves. You know, we feel like they are the best people out there to tell their own story. You know, there's a narrative out there that has been manufactured that says that a lot of these independent contractors are being forced into this, that they should be employees, and our, you know, it's just not a true. It's not a true depiction of, you know, of the marketplace. And Will's a perfect example of people who have made the decision to create their own small business, which we all know is the backbone of our country. They want the independence of being the contractor, of being their own boss, of being their own business person. And, you know, our goal is really quite simply to give these independent contractors a platform to tell their own story. They don't need me doing it. You know, it's helpful to be on a platform like this and talk on a podcast, but really what it is people like Will saying why they chose to do this, what it means to them and their family, and to make sure that the people who ultimately do make the decisions on policy understand the ramifications of the decisions they're making on a daily basis.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate that. Want to know a lot more about the program. But before I do, I'll say, you know, the first time I learned about this was just this last spring at the American Trucking Association's meeting. And the first thing I did was lean over to Chris and say, hey, we got to talk to these guys. You know, and now I know that TrueNorth is a big supporter, and Jason Smith, your fearless leader, was an instigating factor in getting this thing moving again, I should say. Chris, why do you think TrueNorth's taken such an interest in this program?
You know, I could rattle off a handful of reasons, but, you know, back to that conversation in 2017, you know, I remember those conversations at an ATA, American Trucking Association meeting. You know, we've been long-term members of the independent contractor, you know, task force, policy committee, you know, at the ATA level, TCA level, a number of state associations. And this conversation really got started at one of those policy committee meetings. And, you know, we were one of the first to throw in support because the independent contractor model, yeah, Bill made the comment, it's crucial to the industry, it's crucial to the economy, but it's crucial to our business too. We've got a tremendously large network of independent contractors that we support through various ways, whether it be, you know, through motor carriers that have independent contractor drivers or through independent contractors that come to us directly for support. And so it's key to our business. And even more important than that is we're just passionate about that business model. We believe that if an individual wants to become an entrepreneur and buy a truck, lease a truck, however they're going to access it, and start their own business, they should have that freedom to do so. And so more than how it supports our business, we're just passionate about the model, and we are adamant about it continuing, and no legislative body taking that away from individuals.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's a good segue there, Chris. You know, being an entrepreneur, we have one of them on with us today. So, you know, Will, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the industry, and kind of why you choose to be an IC.
Well, first I'll go back to I've been an independent 1099 self-employed person for 40 years. And when I first left the company and went as an independent agent, started a repping business in the housing industry. It was a big step for me. In the first year, I was receiving 1099 statements from the companies I worked with. I felt really wonderful because I saw all this revenue. And then the first year I went in to do my taxes, I realized that, I hadn't paid any of my taxes. Uh-oh. Now I have to borrow a little money to pay that off because I didn't save the money I earned. So it was a realization that there was more to becoming an independent 1099 employee, self-employed versus W-2. So with that first year learning experience, I was able to develop a company until the housing industry crashed, and at that time everything split into the negative figures. And I, being over the road for 30 years, 35 years that way, I said, okay, I'm going to use that to get a Class C license, and I drove school bus for 2 years for special needs. And then continuing forward, that wasn't enough because it was only part-time. I went after my Class A license and came over to DART. About the same time, the oil fields were hiring anybody who could walk, but they wanted people who had military experience, had farm experience, or had off-road experience, and I had none of those things. So I was really and age. My age was again a factor. I was too old for them to invest the time in. So fortunate for me, I came to DART and interviewed with them, and I liked the profile that they had, the clean operation in the business, and been with them for 10 years. In that capacity, I've become a ambassador for the company. So I'm one of 12 in the company that operate over and above the normal standards of independent driver, as well as a driver trainer and a tester. New drivers coming in and having their test taken. So I put myself involved in the business because I like it. I'm used to it. I've developed my life around the windshield, and I enjoy not just the independence, but the independence comes with the responsibility of being able to make the dollars. You make an income according to your efforts. And if you apply yourself and put forth the efforts, the income will be there. Anyone who's in business for themselves knows that their efforts will be rewarded, and they have to put their time, their efforts behind it in order to be successful. And those who try the business think it's an easy road to go, and it's a piece of cake, and I can just get behind the wheel and drive and make money, has to realize there's more to this than just driving behind the windshield. But once you get to that feeling, one of the questions you asked later is, where do I go now? You go the next step, become your own boss. You have indeed the freedom, but you also have the responsibility that goes with it.
Such great comments, Will. It's interesting, that balance between sort of the freedom that you have, but also, the requirements of the job, right? To make a strong living and to put in all that you have. OIDA's 2021 freight survey asked independent contractors why they became owner operators. And the most cited reason, just like you said, was freedom, adventure, and to be their own boss, right? Followed by they love it or enjoy it, and it pays the bills. It sounds like it's interesting that it pays the bills is number 3, and kind of what you're saying is it's equal responsibility there. You do get your freedom, you get your opportunities, but you got to work hard. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that freedom aspect, right? So it takes, I think, a certain ilk for somebody to be a successful independent contractor. What types of freedoms do you think that you've enjoyed as an IC that might not also be enjoyed by an employee driver?
You have the ability. Well, if in a working situation, your time off is unpaid unless you plan it. So you have to book your own vacation time, and in that you have to be smart about booking vacation money for that vacation time. you have to be a man that's working it, working in that industry so that you can keep those things all together. It, it's what do you like? It's I don't know. It's kind of a difficult. It's kind of hard to assess those things because it all relates upon how much ability you have to apply yourself to the job, commit yourself to the 70 hours a week it's going to take, and know that it's going to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks for you to complete your cycle. So after 2 to 3 weeks, if you want to take 3 weeks on and take a week off, you have that ability to take that week off, knowing that you've booked enough time and revenue to cover yourself for the week you take off. And that's very important. Uh, Recently, in the last 200 days, for instance, I'll make a comparison because I've been an IC, independent contractor, and I've been prudent about my expenses, and I've been working my maximum 70 hours when I've been running, a minimum of 11 to 13,000 a month, having 125 to 140,000 miles a year. I've been able to bank enough money that in the last 220 days, I've worked 40. So I've had a lot of unplanned vacation because I've had a truck repaired and a new engine installed. But in that dynamics of the updates and the repairs to the engine, which took about $60,000, I was able to pay for the $60,000 truck engine updates and repairs. I was able to have a considerable amount of time home in broken weeks. So I really couldn't take a really nice vacation to the Bahamas, but I was able to be home with the family and get things done at home on the wife's duty list. But if I hadn't had the independent income and the opportunities through the trucking industries, I would have not been able to put away that much money and be able to pay my bills for the last 6 months and still pay for the truck and be fluid.
Well, it's interesting. I think that's I tell you a great story, Will, and clearly you have grown into the job and are very responsible and are being a great entrepreneur. And I think that's what a lot of people like about the IC model, that it provides that flexibility. And if you do things the right way, you can do things like that and take the time off when you want to. And I think people love that freedom. And so, but obviously you've been around and done and had great experience here. So, maybe shifting back, Bill, to you and the coalition. So obviously Will is an ambassador. He's made a very big success of himself. What about, those that are just contemplating becoming an IC or interested or newer? Like, what types of resources and things is the coalition doing to help those types of drivers and advocate for those types of drivers?
Well, the coalition specifically does not do that. Our Trucker Service Association has 11,000 members, and we really provide a number of resources to help those independent contractors really be more efficient and more profitable. The coalition's role is to give those individual independent contractors a voice. And Will's heard me say this: you build a good enough parade, everybody wants to be in it. We have a lot of passionate contractors out there like Will who all have their individual story. They have their own reasons for wanting to be independent contractors. And from a coalition standpoint, we're simply trying to get that parade all moving in one direction. We had some training here in the last 30, 45 days that Will was a part of, and so were 9 other ambassadors for the coalition. And one of the first things I said to them was, we're not here to tell you what to say. We're here to help you communicate your story. And what's interesting is just sitting in that room, and I know Will can attest to this, we had 5 very different backgrounds of the 5 people that were in that room. One of those was from Serbia, and he'd come over, he'd been in the military. I mean, everybody sort of had their own story, and their own reasons for wanting to be independent contractors. And one of the things that we know from being in the industry for years is that many of these independent contractors started as company drivers. And then through some kind of truck purchase program, they became independent contractors. And as Will has already attested to, that's a drastic change. You go from getting, having your taxes paid and getting a net check to all of a sudden you get a much bigger check, but there's no taxes held out of it. And your tendencies to want to go buy that big screen television or a new pickup truck. And then your steer tires go out and you look down and you don't have any money to buy them. And without steer tires, I don't care how good a driver you are, it's pretty hard to get down the road.
Yeah,
So
true.
there is a learning, there's learning that has to happen. And I think our industry is doing a better job of helping guys and gals move from that company driver concept to independent contractors, because it's not easy. It takes time to build that reserve that Will was able to call on. And quite frankly, when you're an independent contractor, you decide whether you run that day. If you don't accept a load as a company driver, you get fired. If you don't accept it as an independent contractor, you get broke. I mean, that's the way the thing works. So, it takes a level of commitment and really, self motivation to do what Will and another 300 or so thousand independent contractors do every day. So, I think our fleets are doing a much better job of giving these independent contractors the resources they need. But then I believe that the coalition's role is to make sure that somebody like Will Hart, who might never have a chance to be on a podcast like this or sit in front of a congressperson and say, don't do AB5 in Illinois or Minnesota or Michigan. Here's why. Our job is to simply put them in a situation where they can tell their own story. And that's what the coalition's about.
Yeah, the good news is Will's sitting in his truck. He just told us he got brand new steer tires. So I think he'll be all right, to your comment earlier, Bill. But can you tell us about some of your successes so far with this ambassador program? What are the types of audiences that you've encountered? I saw that one of your ambassadors, Dee Sova, was on Fox Business, and I've seen a couple other podcasts and that sort of thing. What types of activities are these folks going about, and how are you able to make all of that? How are you able to make all of that work? Like you said, if Will's not driving, he's not earning. And right now, sadly, we got him parked.
Oh, but I'm in between loads, so that's why I have this disability. So I dropped this morning. Actually, to make this happen, one of the things that we do, well, okay, to answer your question for the ambassador program, um, they selected people who would be the best spokesperson or people that had experience that would be able to us. We're like the Red Cross. We have a problem with the driver and he can't understand how to navigate either his system, or he's unable to make himself profitable, or he's having difficulty managing his time schedules and his pickups and deliveries. And so as an ambassador, we open ourselves up to help others in our company to perform better, and to reassure them that the issues that they're having are not theirs alone, that everybody does encounter these potholes in the road, and it's just part of our industry, where you can expect to get a load, you go to the shipper, and within the time you drove there, they canceled the load, and there you are, the truck's been ordered but not needed. And so you're disappointed about these burps in the road, and you need someone to reassure you that it's not, don't take it personal. It's not you. It's the way the industry is working, and it's just part of the industry and the way it works. So being an ambassador, we, um, they feel that, uh, truckers who have the experience have been through those ropes and down those roads before, so they're able to best talk to another driver and reassure them that here's a problem I've had. This is how it was handled. And so it becomes, no, we
Like a
come,
mentorship,
yeah,
kind of.
absolutely.
That's great.
So, so in order to get here for this, I had a load. I took it in, and I sat on the receiver's doorstep. Pulled in last night. Sat on the receiver's doorstep early this morning. Was able to get unloaded at 6:30 rather than 11 o'clock. Get back
Ooh,
here to
great
Dud,
job.
and then my next pickup will be at 5:30 this afternoon. So in between those 2 hours, I had this opportunity with a mechanic to take a look at my steers, and he said, "Will, I think they're time to go." So I got on the phone and over to Goodyear. Boom, bang, boom. I got them on, and efficiency of using your time well is very important, and not waiting until you're under the hook or at the DOT, or prevention is always the best cure. So,
Well,
Steve,
I
if
think
I can, if you don't mind. So
Yeah, please.
one of the points that Will just brought up, I think that's really critical is, it's his time. It's not the trucking company's time. It's his time. So being able to effectively use that. But I will say Will drives for a company that has been on the front end of independent contractor issues for years. Dart has been a leading proponent of the independent contractor model. The Orans, I mean, there's probably nobody out there who understands the independent contractor model better than the Oren family. So they created that ambassador program to to do exactly what Will's talked about. Our ambassadors are really about trying to tell that story. Will happens to be an ambassador for Dart, but we're trying to put our ambassadors in a situation to where they can explain for themselves why they're doing what they're doing. It could be in an environment like this. Now, I have to say, we're very early in the process. We've trained ambassadors in 2 states. Washington State will be our next state, but we're beginning to use them. Dee Sova did a great job on Fox Business. She's a shining example of what we're trying to accomplish. If we could replicate that 1,000 times over the next year to 2 years, then we will have done our job. But really, the key is to work with the state association executives. When I ran the Texas Association for 10 years, we always looked west, because whatever crazy happened in California, you could guarantee Texas was probably the next place it was going to come to.
Sure.
So when we saw the whole AB5 type stuff begin to happen before there was an AB5 in California, we knew it would flow east. And that's what it's done. And so there are very different approaches to how the independent contractor model is under attack, for lack of a better term. In California, it's happened at the General Assembly level. In the states, it happens sometimes with the legislative area. Sometimes it's an agency, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. Then you go to Washington and you think everything happens in Congress. But right now, the biggest challenge to the independent contractor model is through the Department of Labor and a rulemaking they're doing. So it manifests itself in different ways, and sometimes it's not a direct challenge. And I'll give you an example in Texas. When I was in Texas, our attorney general ruled that even though you weren't an employee, that anybody in the state of Texas who was getting income, if they were not paying their child support, then it had to be withheld from their check and given to the state. Well, our argument was not that we were in favor of deadbeat dads and they shouldn't have to pay if they're independent contractors. Our point was, you've got the IRS sitting out here using various things to change the status of independent contractors to employees and costing a lot of people money. And now you're giving them another one. And that is to say, we don't care that they're not employees. You have to withhold it. And in Texas, they use the term from their paycheck. And we said there is no paycheck for an independent contractor. They didn't care. They didn't want to hear that. So that was part of a rulemaking. It eventually became statute. And now we've got this rule sitting there that erodes and degrades the independent contractor status, but they didn't care. And so that was just another leg that we got kicked out from under us. So what we're trying to do is use the state associations because they're closer to where the pavement meets the road, no pun intended. And when something pops up in Minnesota or Illinois or Texas or Washington, and we identified about 12 states with the help of Scopolitas. Greg Ferry helped us figure out where the states were that were the most ambitious and most problematic. We focused on those states first. And then when that state association executive, that state trucking association executive needs someone, for instance, John Hosselod in Minnesota needs someone to come to the state house and testify or sit in front of an independent legislator or talk to anyone, he now has a roster of people like Will that he can contact. We will compensate Will for his time that he's off the road. We compensate them $850 a day, whether it's for an hour or 10 hours. And that way they can go do the work for our coalition and for their fellow independent contractors and for themselves and not be hit in the pocketbook for that. So that's really what our coalition is doing. They could be anything. They could be at a truck show. They could be on a podcast. They could be at a meeting. They could testify at a legislative hearing. ATA or TCA could ask for them to come to Washington to work on an issue. So we have accepted donations from a number of motor carriers and great companies like TrueNorth. We've raised about $100,000, and our job is to use that money to compensate people like Will so they can tell their stories without it being a financial burden.
Well,
Please, Will.
and may I say, what Bill is saying over and above the cost of being compensated fairly, it's important that what he's saying is that he's putting real people from the real jobs in front of the legislators, that this is who I am. They're putting a name to the face to the project. And by doing that, they're not talking to a lobbyist. They're not talking to a business owner. They're talking to someone who's got grease under his fingernails, who works 13 hours a day, who puts in 70-hour weeks, who is away from his family, who's who's keeping the economy rolling, who's delivering the toothpaste, the toothbrushes, the beer you drink, the charcoal you cook with, and the steaks you broil and cook, making it happen. And you're putting real people behind something. And when you can put real people in the front of legislation, you can change the course by the power of one.
Oh yeah,
Well,
I think that's so well said. Sorry, Steve. I just want to before I lose it, I want to give Will the opportunity. Bill talked about this is kind of tough. Will and Bill and but we'll figure it out. I want to give Will a chance. Bill mentioned that part of your job, Will, is to go in front of these legislatures and tell them why you do what you do. So I want to ask you two questions. Number one, why do you do what you do? Why are you an independent contractor? And second, what would you say to the legislator who was to say, that independent contractors, that motor carriers are predatory and that they're trying to take advantage of their independent contractors when we know that the business model might be a little different than that? What would you say to those detractors?
Well, I'd say their information is totally false. And because if they're using a directive in order to pursue their own agenda, it is totally false. There's nothing predatory about the opportunity, because as an independent contractor, if someone is going to bite me in the butt, I can say, thank you very much, I don't like your company, and I have that choice of leaving. An independent contractor has a door that swings both ways. I can be fired or I could be hired, and I can do the very same to the company I'm working with. So the opportunity of being a predator is really non-existent. The predator may be existing inside a company owned when the person has no choice and he has to make that job, he has to make that decision, and he has to go to work because he doesn't want to take the risk or the rewards, which are in a balance, of being able to be an independent contractor and being out on your own and working as a 1099 employee and having your own business. So the efforts that they say that it's predatory um, is truly incorrect. The predatory is only used to still excite people that companies are taking advantage of them. The AB5 was a crybaby situation in California with the Uber and the Lyft people who realized that they were making all this money, and when they went to their first year to pay their taxes because they had a 1099, went, oh my gosh, I got to pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 in taxes. Oh my God! Well, that shouldn't be. How come I'm
I didn't
doing
save
that?
any of that money through the year.
I didn't save the money, and it created a hysteria, and they got their legislature assembly, and they started crying, crying, crying. Well, Bill, if you will tell the story about how our Democratic governor, Mr. Carlson, vetoed the only bill he vetoed in Minnesota was the one that was an AB5 bill, and it's a very interesting comment that I'd like him to share. If you could.
Oh, interesting anecdote. Please share,
Yeah.
Bill.
Well, actually, that John Hauslot in Minnesota, the state association executive, has a much better grasp of that than I do. But I do want to say, to Will's point, when 20 years ago we started dealing with this issue of reclassifying independent contractors. But interestingly enough, when that happened, that was because the IRS was at our doorstep, and the IRS wanted to collect more taxes. So they went into trucking companies. It happened to us at FFE. I remember the day they walked in the door and wanted to start reclassifying independent contractors and as employees and get back taxes. And truthfully, we weren't treating employees and independent contractors the way they needed to be treated. They were being dispatched by the same people. Independent contractors were filling out employment applications, but our industry began to clean that up. And so we got over one hump, but then in, I don't know, 2012 or 13, then the unions got involved. And the unions decided if we they can't organize independent contractors, but if we can turn them into employees, then that will get us more people in our union halls. So that became the effort in the early teens. And then in the last 2 to 3 years, the plaintiff bar got involved, and they figured out they could buy some new cars and bigger houses if they went and sued trucking companies over this because of predatory practices, and went around trying to gather up independent contractors, to Will's point, who weren't in a position to do what they thought they were going to do and felt like they had, maybe legitimately, maybe not, felt like they had been taken advantage of. So the people that have been behind this have changed. It was the government, it was the unions, then it was the plaintiff bar. I don't know who will be next, but hopefully we're better prepared this time around than we have been in the past.
Well, I think to that point, Bill, clearly your organization and the organization supporting it, a coordinated effort is needed, right? And it's happening, and I think it's making a difference. And clearly, I think the actions that are going on and that messaging, and I think for a long period, to your point, for a long time in our industry, we kind of sat back and let things happen. And I think being more proactive now and being out front on things is making a difference. And you and the ambassadors should be commended for your efforts. But a couple things I wanted to hit on, and I guess back, Will, your point on taxes, interesting anecdote there. Both of my sons are independent contractors. They drive for Instacart, and so they've had an interesting experience about being their own little business people at 19 and 20. So they're getting a real life experience there too, just like you did when you first started. And I like the fact that we talk a lot about giving back to the industry, and the fact of what you're doing and you're giving back. You're not just doing your job, but you're helping other drivers, I think is really a testament to yourself. And I think as all of us, as we're getting older, we need to all kind of follow that model. And maybe turning to you, Chris, I think obviously you mentioned ICs is a big part of your guys' business at TrueNorth. So maybe talk a little about the things you were doing to support independent contractors and the model over there at TrueNorth.
Yeah, happy to. I mentioned earlier our involvement with a number of associations. Obviously there are the advocacy groups that we become part of, and we throw our support behind both in terms of membership and participation, but dollars. So we're a big part of ATA, American Trucking Associations, as well as TCA at the federal level. There are a number of kind of smaller, I would say more niche organizations that we're part of in smaller parts of the transportation industry at the federal level, as well as probably 20 plus state associations. And we try not to just be the members that show up and pass out business cards, but really try to get engaged in the committees, in the task force. So we've been on some level of TrueNorth. I'm on both the TCA and ATA IC committee. They call them slightly different things, but I'm involved with both of those, and we commit dollars and try to support in terms of adding value, putting content out there, et cetera. There's a lot that we do then kind of that's core to our business as an insurance broker. We've worked hard to really develop a suite of resources that do support the motor carriers, right? The motor carriers that have needs, they need our resource, they need our services, but we've really developed out that same level of resource for the independent contractors as well. We've a long time ago, we developed a platform for independent contractors. We call it an IC ecosystem. So how does an independent contractor like Will aggregate buying power with other independent contractors? So we've established a healthcare program, for example. As you guys can appreciate, if I'm a company driver, I can tap into the company's health plan, and I probably get a reduced rate because they've negotiated a better price and the company probably pays for a portion of that. As an independent contractor, that fully goes away. You're on your own. You not only aren't getting coverage paid for, but you don't even have access to it. So we created an association-based program to be able to allow access to ICs, and we've got several thousand ICs that are buying coverage through that program for everything from medical coverage to dental and life and disability and so on and so forth. Where we've innovated technology platforms to try to streamline some of the day-to-day administration around the insurance program enrollment. So, a guy like Will, he's got limited time. He was just telling us about how he was able to squeeze in this podcast. How do we remove friction from the day-to-day life cycle for an independent contractor so that they can really focus on delivering freight safely? There's a lot more that we could go into, I'm sure, but that's, maybe high level, some of the things that we've done in terms of, obviously from an advocacy standpoint. Maybe one last example. Bill was talking earlier about, calling on state level legislators, lawmakers. A number of people within our firm, including myself, have done, calls on Washington, where we go and meet with legislators and Congress people, et cetera. Or at the state level. We just had at the Iowa Motor Truck Association, we participated in that. And independent contractor status is always a topic that we like to bring up because it's so important to us. So again, I don't need to ramble on and steal the show here, but that's a few examples of what we're doing.
That's great. And we really appreciate the support of TrueNorth, obviously, to independent contractors in the industry at large. I know we're rounding the bend here, just kind of getting close to the end. So I want to kind of tee that up, and I want to ask each of you a question. I'll just ask them all at once, and then you can answer them how you like, and then I'll pass it back to Steve. But Will, from you, I'd like to know if Sean Garney is a new independent contractor. It's my first week or month on the job. What's that one most important piece of advice you'd give me? And Bill, before we leave, I want to make sure that you use this podcast as a platform to to promote the coalition. So tell people how they can get involved, how they can contact you, how they can donate if they're interested in that cause. And then from Chris, what do you think the average independent contractor who's not an ambassador, how do you think they can positively impact this this independent contractor model? And so I'll start with Will, but thank you all.
Very good. Very briefly, a driver, an independent contractor, does not see the entire picture of the national freight availability or the freight boards. They cannot know everything. So the most important thing for a new driver is to accept every load your dispatch gives you. It's like going to the grocery store. You can't survive on just buying steak. You got to buy onions and potatoes. Well, onions and potatoes are 20 cents a pound, and a steak is $12 a pound. If you're looking just for the steak, you're not going to be able to eat the entire meal unless you also buy the potatoes and the onions and the carrots. So when you're
And you
out
won't be
there on the
healthy
road,
either.
I was going to
you've
say, you
got
need
to
your
take
veggies
every
too.
load you get.
Interesting. That was great. Thanks, Will. Bill?
Well, so there's more information that's available that's at our website, our TSA website, and it's just tsatruck.org. And when you get there, you will find a tab for the Coalition for Independent Truckers. But the other way to get involved is if you're an independent contractor, is to tell your company that you would like to be, because most of our companies are aware of the effort. But you can also always email me at bwebb, BWEBB, at legacy, FEM, like Frank Edward Mary.com. And that gets to me directly. And then we have a number of ways. What we're trying to do is make sure that someone like Will doesn't have to go to Texas or Washington or California. There are opportunities to do it very close to them. And so we're, again, trying to work with the state association executives. So you can do it through your company. You can contact me directly, or you can work through your state association, state trucking association. And in one of those ways, it'll wind up getting back to us, and then we can go from there.
Fantastic. Chris, final thoughts?
If we're talking to the average independent contractor, I would not put Will in that bucket. He's obviously an exceptional one. But if we were just talking to the average independent contractor at a random truck stop, my suspicion is that many of them probably don't even know, or at least they don't understand the magnitude of what's going on within Washington and or within their state in terms of attacking the IC model. And when you think about the number of commercial truck drivers that exist within the industry, we're talking about in the millions. And Bill called it out earlier. There's about somewhere between maybe 300 to 350,000 independent contractor, owner operator drivers in the country. If an IC decided tomorrow they wanted to become an employee company driver, they could have a number of job offers. Will could go into any one of the companies in the Minneapolis area, wherever Will you call home, and he could have a job tomorrow. There's no question about that. And so I think just spreading awareness, making sure people understand that there is an attack on the model. And, if you're passionate about it, if you like what you're doing, get involved. That doesn't mean you have to become an ambassador, but share the word, tell your buddies at the truck stops, tell your fellow ICs at the company that you're driving for, share the word, and do what you can to be an advocate.
I think that's well said, because legislation gets passed and we know nothing about it until it slaps us in the pocketbook or it
So
squeezes our
true.
business. So we're on the front edge of this. We're not going to let it go. Like Bill said, we look at California for the craziness and be aware that it starts to come east like the smoke in the clouds.
Well, on top of that, our industry has been really, I'm going to say bad, or we've been really good at sort of pinballing behind whatever issue is most relevant that day. And it causes us to not have a lot of staying power sometimes when it comes to issues. And to Will's point, I feel like with the support of with TrueNorth and Scopelitis and other companies and fleets, that we're out front a little more on this issue. You know, Will used the term a while ago, the Red Cross. I would take it even a little bit deeper and say we're like SWAT. We hope SWAT's never needed, but when it's needed, we want to be ready to deploy, and that's what the coalition's doing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, very good. So before I finish this out, I do have one more question for you, Will, if you don't mind. So what do you think the most important thing for today's young people should know about our industry and why they should consider joining it and becoming a driver?
It's the last thing on my list, and I'm glad you mentioned it. My best advice is to come into our industry before family or after family, and in between, haul local.
Amen, brother.
There you go. There you go.
Great.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. We appreciate you taking the time and all three of you for your contributions to our industry and this very important part of it. You're making an impact, and we appreciate that. So I'll go ahead and round us out here. So thanks for listening to this episode of True North Truck Thought. If you enjoyed the topic today and want to tune in for future conversations here on the Triple T Pod, make sure to follow us. Also, please don't hesitate to let us know which topics you want us to cover in future episodes. Drop us a line in the comments section or send us an email to transportationnews@truenorthcompanies.com. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.